Hi, I'm David Peterson, and I have the great opportunity to get to chat with the Executive Director for Solar Rights Alliance, Dave Rosenfeld. Pleasure to meet you, Dave.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you too, David.
So I am just dying to talk to anyone about first of all, let me thank you and your entire organization, everybody that works for you, for working so hard, tirelessly to defend our solar rights, the ability for just regular citizens to produce electricity with the sunshine that hits their rooftops, their backyards, and shines down on us every day.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. And the cool thing about the fight is that it really is like a group effort. There's over 100,000 people have spoken up, and that's why we're even getting any traction here. So it's received, and back at you, and then back at everybody who has been speaking out and taking action on this issue.
So you are defending the future plans of PG&E to tax us for producing solar electricity. And I I applaud that and I love that. And I want to go further. I'm praying that someone will talk to me about the many other fines, fees, and restrictions that PG&E currently puts on all of us solar producers. Um, so the biggest one that comes to mind for me is we are limited to personal use. We can only put solar panels on our roof that are equal to how much we use, nothing more. And for most folks, you can look at Google Maps, that's a small fraction of your rooftop. It's like 20%.
Yeah. Yeah. If you just think about, like, okay, the government is saying we need to get rid of all the fossil fuel plants. You need to replace that with renewable energy. They're saying to do that, you're going to have to triple all forms of wind and solar, like both the large scale stuff and the stuff that's on our rooftops. At the same time, the government's saying by 2035, you got to buy an electric car. You got to buy electric appliances. Everything's going to go electric. All right. And so regardless of whether you think that's a good idea or not a good idea, because we know that it's a diverse audience, right? That's what the government's saying you're going to do. So why in the world would you be limiting the amount of energy if people are willing to invest their own money to
Yep.
put a power plant on top of their rooftop that makes clean local energy? Why in the world would you put any restriction on how much people can put up on that rooftop? It seems like we need tons and tons and tons of energy, not just for people to make it for themselves, but to then share it with their neighbors. And so I completely agree with you. We should be doing everything we can to encourage people to maximize the amount of solar that they're willing to invest in and put up on the rooftop.
I mean, they currently, PG&E does not charge me if I buy a vacuum or if I buy a vacuum for every room or if I buy a blow dryer or a toaster. Why are they charging me for something that I buy that runs the meter backwards? That's just completely unfair. I mean, it's net, right? So I produce it, I use it, and we only have to worry about the difference.
Right.
I want people to be able to install treadmills or bicycles that turn their meter backwards. Why not? And again, there should be no charge for that. And the same for a wind chime in the backyard, or one that goes around and generates electricity.
Yeah.
Why should PG&E be charging us for that? They should not even be aware of the appliances that we have: refrigerators, washers, dryers, whatever burns electricity. I mean, they currently don't track that. And I sincerely object to them infringing on our liberties to produce as much electricity as we want.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what it is. It's an infringement on our liberties. And it's an infringement in so many different ways, and it's clearly just a result of them being a monopoly for 150 years. And just like they just want to maintain that monopoly. I mean, nobody's even suggesting, oh, PG&E. I mean, some people are suggesting PG&E go away. But it's not like the presence of rooftop solar means PG&E goes away. It just means they get to be less of a monopoly, and they just have to share the table with people that are willing to invest in making their own energy. Yeah, something I was just thinking about with regards to the credit that solar users get for sharing their extra energy with the grid, which is what the heart of this whole thing is about. You
I
know,
don't get a credit. They rip me off. My neighbor next door, that's so the first thing is they limit how much I can produce.
mhm.
Second, if I do produce a little bit extra or I don't use so much in 1 year, my neighbor next door runs his air conditioning all the time. He pays 38 cents a kilowatt. He could buy electricity from me at half of that. It's ridiculous that PG&E's highest margins are between my house and my neighbor's house on solar electricity.
Well,
They, I only get 4 cents a kilowatt if I produce anything extra.
so if you have solar, you're making energy, and most of the time you're just using it to run your lights and all this kind of stuff. When you make extra, it goes out, spins your meter backwards, as you say, goes into the neighborhood, and the utility then sells that energy to your neighbor at whatever the retail rate is. So let's pretend it's 35 cents per kilowatt hour.
Mhm.
At that very moment, they sell it to your neighbor for 35 cents. And PG&E is terrible about making this clear. You have any credits left after that entire 12-month period, the utility basically cashes you out for, as you say, bupkas, 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Um, and that would be truly devastating. Like, your system would just never pay back. I mean, it just wouldn't work. And it's just unfair.
No, I mean, that's to me, that's everything. That's the free market. So I purchase commercial solar on my
Mhm.
bill because my community put together one of those commercial solar purchasing programs. And my municipal community did that and forced it on PG&E to allow us to buy that energy. First of all, it's solar and purely green. And second of all, PG&E doesn't get to take such a large cut. So that electricity I'm buying at 17 cents a kilowatt versus
Mhm.
when I buy electricity from PG&E, it starts out at 22 cents and ultimately gets up to 38 cents a kilowatt on my bill. I'm sure
Yeah.
everyone's is different. And so I'm a small electricity user. I only use $600 worth of electricity a year. Many people use much, much more. And my rooftop is huge. And back to the original where they don't let me put one on. If I put one panel more than my usage on, Elon Musk's minions said, "Hey, PG&E is going to cut you off the grid. You can't put one panel more on your roof or they'll cut you off." This is ridiculous.
Mhm.
My roof should be covered with solar. The inverter's already working. I'm already paying for that. I bought a brand new roof for $18,000. Why is 80% of my rooftop empty? Are
Yeah.
you telling me that it can't generate solar electricity? I don't believe it. I think it can.
Yeah.
The north side of the house, east side of the house, west side of the south side of the house. If I see sunshine hitting my roof, which it doesn't everywhere because of shade trees, then I want to be generating electricity from that. And I want to be selling it to my neighbors at the same rate that I can sell it, that the commercial outfits sell. I want a free market for residential solar. I don't see it. Even if
You're,
we
you're
do have that now, I still don't have the ability to put solar on the rest of my roof. So I had to buy a new roof, $18,000. And that's an investment, right? I'm paying in and I expect a return on that investment. I, I can't believe that we're subjected to this limitation of 1/5 of our rooftop. I'd like to see that illegal rule, corrupt rule put onto the coal companies so that 1 in 5 lumps of coal that they pull out of the ground is all they're allowed to sell for electricity make. Let them sit
right.
on the rest of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, this is like, it just gets back to just, it's insane, right? Like if you're going and are willing to invest your own money to put solar panels on your rooftop, on your property, and this is going to not only benefit, it's going to benefit the community in every single way, right? Like, it's not even, obviously you're doing it to first and foremost create more financial security for your own household, of course, and
Yep.
that's the right thing to do. But then when you do it, you are benefiting the entire community. First off, you're pulling less energy from long distance power lines, which means that they don't have to spend as much to maintain and build new ones. And that's really the reason why we pay out of our nose for electricity bills, because that's what the utility, how they make their profits. We can unpack that, but that's one. Number two is you're getting clean energy on the grid at a time when the state is basically saying we need more clean energy on the grid, for all the reasons we were talking about before. you're sharing that extra clean energy with your neighbors. It costs very little to share local clean energy because the local distribution system just isn't as expensive. They then don't have to pull all that energy from those long distance power lines that spark wildfires and go down and cause blackouts and that kind of thing.
Which is a huge problem in our neighborhood.
Huge problem, right? And so you're like, why in the world would we be putting up any kind of obstacle to people who are willing to do this? It is like the most win-win-win you can get. And again, it's the only reason why is just these guys are a monopoly. And then the whole thing is corrupt. And so, you know, the Public Utilities Commission, but the system itself is corrupt. Like there's a revolving door of staff and just, you know, other people who bureaucrats
when they cast a vote to approve screwing the consumers and putting extra money into the pocket of PG&E for no good reason, there's not a criminal penalty for that. So they're good people because we don't have the laws in place to show them that that's something that they shouldn't be doing. So that's a little bit of a misnomer that's missing. And I want to go back to where we opened the conversation and you were talking about the government. Mm-hmm. And yeah, okay, the government has laws and they have some things that are corrupt and inept, but the government is the people. And if the people let their representatives screw them and let them allow PG&E to push corrupt rules on us, then it's our fault because we keep reelecting the same incumbents that let them get away with it. And I mean, we really have to take that responsibility on ourselves and recognize that when we cast a ballot, we are approving of corruption unless we do something different and vote for the challenger that says, hey, I want to eliminate this corruption.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in the idea of individual agency, that the idea that, like, you know, we all have a responsibility to essentially advocate for ourselves. And one thing that we do at the Solar Rights Alliance that we tell people is like, you know, I'm the executive director. I don't speak on your behalf. You know, like my job is to give you information, to keep track of what the politicians and the regulators and the utilities are up to. I'm going to give you information, and then I expect you, the solar user or the solar supporter, to use your voice and to use it in every possible way that you can. And we're going to give you suggestions about how you can use your voice to be effective. So, you know, I do think like freedom is never something that's just handed on a silver platter. Freedom is something that was fought for, and it has to be fought for over and over and over and over and over again. And those like PG&E that have basically had an enormous amount of power, they've consolidated their power both among themselves. They've consolidated their power inside many aspects of our government, both the regulatory branches and the electoral branches. And that power just isn't going to give itself up without a fight. And so that's what this is, you know, in a lot of ways is about is, you know, I think people recognizing they have a stake in this whole thing. They have a voice in this whole thing. And even though the government itself in the process can be extremely frustrating, extremely opaque, impenetrable, designed to shut out civic participation, all these things are absolutely true. It is also the case that we, the solar users, are on the cusp of a very consequential revolution that's happening right before our very eyes, and that, you know, people feel very strongly about this, and the public opinion polling is off the charts, but also the way that people have responded to the CPUC's awful proposal has been, I wouldn't say remarkable, but exactly what you would expect when they're trying to take your freedom away. And so now we just need to keep doing that and more.
And that's for the new restrictions that they're proposing. But I'm trying, and I think that goes to where you say agency and citizens and their ability to fight for it. I feel that people are unaware of the current restrictions on solar producers. And I feel that our neighbors who are close by and could benefit from our solar production, they don't have that visibility. They don't see that they could have the ability to be saving electricity, buying electricity from their residential solar producers, as we do from commercial solar producers, and getting a huge discount, a discount that PG&E doesn't offer because they are the competition. And I think raising that awareness and letting people know, hey, you could save $600 on electricity if we get rid of these corrupt regulations from PG&E, you can get this huge discount by buying from residential solar producers, just like you can buy from commercial solar producers, and then you don't have to buy from PG&E. Some of my constituents, I'm talking to them about it, and they say, yeah, I pay $2,400 a year in electricity, running a lot of air conditioning. And it's like, wow, you're in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
And I would love to sell you my electricity at half the price that PG&E is gouging you for. You could save $600 easy. They would save $1,200. Of course, I need the ability to put solar panels on the rest of my roof, the other 80%. But to me, it's our grid, right? Why does PG&E get to make the rules that, oh, if you do this, we're going to kick you off the grid? It's not your grid, it's our grid. We bought it, we paid for it, it's ours. You keep it maintained and you gouge us and you charge us all these fees, but it's our grid. And
Yeah.
I don't think that we should be kicked off the grid. I think PG&E should be kicked off the grid.
Yeah. I mean, the convicted criminal enterprise is a good way to describe PG&E at this point.
But how do we raise awareness among citizens and constituents? How do we let them know that PG&E is corrupt? How do we let them know these are the specific rules that PG&E does to screw us all? And how do we let them know that when you cast your ballot, you have an opportunity to do something better. You have an opportunity to vote against corruption without putting that specific, a bill, an initiative on the ballot for every one of these corrupt things that they do. Just the candidates that you're voting for, the incumbents that let the status quo go by and don't challenge this. We don't have that relationship with constituents. You've taken some polls and some surveys and you've gotten people to come out and say, yeah, I'm against new fines, fees, and penalties and taxes, but we haven't made people aware of the existing restrictions on solar production.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of the problem, I mean, so first, here, a couple of thoughts about all this. So first off, I would say 15 years ago, when the Million Solar Roofs Initiative got launched, there wasn't very much solar in the state at all. I think there was like 20,000 systems as compared to like 1.3 million. And to go solar then, you had to be wealthy or very technical, like, kind of a DIY sort of ham radio sort of person. I mean that in the best of ways. I'm not technical at all. And today, you don't have to be wealthy. You don't have to be technical to get the solar. And that's amazing. Just under half of all new solar is going into working in middle-class neighborhoods. A really interesting stat that just blows my mind is that in 2019, which is the last year we have data, more people whose household income was under $50,000 a year went solar than people whose household income was over $250,000 a year. It's really happening now.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that has now happened, and this is why the Solar Rights Alliance is only 4 years old, but one thing that has happened is we have a critical mass of people now who are personally experiencing the idea of solar rights, energy rights. This idea that you have the sun is there, and you know what I mean, it shines over it for 4 billion years. It has shined over this planet, and it comes up every day, and it's free, and nobody can own it. And we have this amazing technology. We've been using the sun for millennia. Now we have this amazing technology that allows us to power our homes and our lives with it. And it's now just getting into a place where it's almost like a cell phone, like almost anyone can get it. We're not quite there yet, but we're like, it's getting there, right? And I think 15 years ago, I don't think anyone would have thought about the idea of solar rights. Like, solar itself just seemed like, well, that's just something that people over there do, but not something that I would ever do. So we're just now entering that period where it's like a common thing, where the everyday person is going like, not only do I want that to cut my energy bills, but maybe I even have a right to that in some kind of fundamental way. So we're just now on the dawn of, I think, a really kind of like exciting time in the public mind, where the range of what's possible, the range of their own rights is bigger now than it was before. And so that back to your idea of like, I should be able to just, put as many panels on my roof as I'm willing to put on, and I should be able to sell all that energy to my neighbors. That's kind of like, I think a lot of times people get solar and don't even realize that they don't have that right. And I think as people are developing their own consciousness about this whole thing, more and more people are just getting outraged and are pushing back. One more thought, and then, I'll kind of wrap up what I'm saying is, you're also pointing out that this net metering fight is very much defensive, right? All we're just trying to do is just stop an absurd thing from happening, which is to tax people for putting solar panels on their roof and shrink down the net metering credit to virtually nothing. Obviously, that's very small bore. All we're just doing is just fighting to just kind of keep off the worst forms of utility tyranny, really. Um, but of course, there's a lot of other things I would like to be spending our time on, rather than just kind of fighting for our lives. Another example is the way that PG&E slow walks interconnections. I don't know if you've had this experience, but many people have it. It's another obstacle, where oftentimes it'll take months before PG&E will turn your system on. And
Yes, I was absolutely hit by that. It was my
yeah,
next point.
you've invested all this money,
My
you're
system
ready
was
to go.
installed by Solar City, Elon Musk's crew,
Mhm.
and PG&E came out and passed it inspection. Obviously, the building department passed inspection, but they wanted more paperwork, they said.
Yeah.
And so PG&E left it off for 6 months.
Mhm.
And for 6 months, they stole the electricity from me, from Solar City.
Like the way you put the interconnection delays, because really what's happening is that they delay it so that essentially they can steal several months worth of energy from you
Yep.
before they actually turn the system on. And it doesn't matter whether that's actually, you could prove it, that's what's happening just by virtue of a delay that has no rhyme or reason to it. And I would like to be like, that's something I would like to be fighting if we weren't working to defend. And I would like to be working to obviously expand, system sizing and all that kind of stuff. And
Well,
so it's,
I'll solve that problem on the federal level. It's primarily a state issue. All these laws are with the state PUC and that type of thing. But if we take that theft of electricity from individual solar producers that goes to the utility companies like PG&E, and we just put a federal tax on it of 5 times that amount. So if they steal $300 worth of electricity, they have to pay $1,500 to the federal government.
yeah, I
That's
think
how
that,
we eliminate it. That's how we get rid of the corruption.
yeah, we definitely have to, I mean, interconnection delays are a huge problem. Um,
They're
there's other,
very lucrative. Have to admit it. It's a great strategy, PG&E. They're putting a lot of money in their pocket.
well, and it probably discourages a number of people from even just doing it because they hear from their neighbors, oh, there's a bunch of paperwork and delays and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, like that's, it's just totally an issue. Another thing while we're just talking about like barriers and that kind of stuff, and this one I think is really, it's a big deal. And it also just exposes just, how they're just liars, that they don't really care about equity. Because obviously utilities line is, we need rooftop solar. Their whole argument is rooftop solar is bad for people who don't have solar, right? Like that's their kind of core argument. And of
Because they
course,
don't give them access to it. They don't give them
so
cut rates.
right,
But
but PG&E,
I could run an extension cord over my neighbor and give them a cut rate really easy.
right.
That's $20.
Point is PG&E does not care about equity, and they never have. And then of course, then they turn around and just go, oh, solar's for the rich, and it's kind of like, well, one, it's not, as you pointed out. And then number two is there's lots of ways with which we can make solar even more available to people who are lower on the income scale by just removing some of these stupid barriers that you yourself have put in place, for no rhyme or reason. Just going through like a list of other barriers that, that the utilities have thrown in place. And that's one of them. Another one, while we're on the subject, is regarding multifamily homes. So, again, you'll hear the utilities go, oh, solar's for rich people, it's not on apartments, that kind of thing, which is wrong. Actually, there's a ton of solar that's going up on apartment buildings and multifamily homes and that kind of thing.
But still
But
just a small footprint.
small footprint. And one reason why is because the mechanism within net metering that allows rooftop solar to benefit renters, they only let it happen in only very small parts of the state versus
That's
just letting
correct.
it happen on all multifamily homes.
Yeah.
And
From
there's no
my point of
justification
view,
for that.
if someone has solar and there's a portion of their roof that doesn't have solar because of PG&E's restrictions, that's a revenue loss. That's money that PG&E is stealing from them If
Yeah.
they're not allowing them to put solar on the balance of their roof, they're ripping them off. And I mean, business to business, if PG&E was stealing directly from General Motors or Tesla or DuPont or Exxon, they would sue them in court. They would
Yeah.
take that back. They would say, you're restricting my revenue, you're restricting my profit. I want you to compensate me so that I can recover the damages you've done to me.
Yeah, it's a taking. It's anti-competitive behavior. It's, it's antitrust behavior. It's essentially taking somebody's liberty to both, chart their own financial independence, to be able to participate in a marketplace. I mean, it's all those things. That it's not obvious to everybody is only just a function of just how, 150 years of a monopoly can just really kind of, rot away sort of our sense of like what our rights really are, right?
Yeah.
And
Everybody's just glazed over. Well, that's what PG&E charges me. What can I do?
that's the way it is, but that's changing, and it's changing in really big and fundamental ways. And I think that's what's amazing now, is that we're on the cusp of really now a political movement of, I'll give you another example. Is in the New York Times 2 weeks ago, they did a focus group of people who are just really having a hard time financially right now, with inflation and, just rising bills and everything like that. And it wasn't about rooftop solar at all. But they were just asking people, like, tell us what it's like to go grocery shopping and, just do your day-to-day life. And, New York Times has kind of been elitist since, newspaper, but still, it was a good question to ask. And I think politicians ought to ask that question more of people, what it's like to go and try to buy chicken at the grocery store and that kind of thing. Well, one woman from San Diego, it turns out, was talking about how her utility bill, is like tripled. And then she goes on and on, go like, and then on top of that, I've just heard that now they're going after the people who are putting solar panels on their roof. And, and then she ended by going, you can't win. And so what I say by that is going like, this woman probably doesn't have solar, but she identifies with this fight of people who are trying to basically get out from under the monopoly and create a new paradigm. So you know, your question before about like, how do we get, kind of more people riled up? I think I would argue it's happening. It's not happening big enough. It's not happening fast enough. So I think the kind of like, how do we do it is like this conversation, we're out campaigning, we're spreading the word. People are writing letters to the editor. They're, calling into radio talk shows. They are testifying at the California Public Utilities Commission. They're sending out emails to, people on their list. They're posting on social media. These are the tools of grassroots
We
education.
need bigger voices that listen. I mean, for example, Elon Musk, he's getting ripped off by this every day. Every time he does an install, and he installs a smaller system than the customer actually wants. And his own minions, they come out to the house, they need to repair the inverter, need to update the software drivers. And his own minions, they say, oh yeah, well, PG&E doesn't want to buy your extra electricity. It's like, of course they don't. They're my competition. My neighbor wants to buy my extra electricity and he can't. He's getting ripped off. And I mean, if Elon Musk can't step up and recognize that he is getting ripped off and teach his own team that, it is PG&E that's pushing these outrageous, corrupt rules on the rest of us. I mean, that seems like a voice that people love to listen to, whether they want to make fun of him or applaud him. This seems like a fight that he should be in with us.
Well, I think he is. I mean, Elon Musk definitely, I mean, he's got a huge Twitter following, and he alerted his following to the CPUC's attack on rooftop solar.
Again,
Tesla,
future fines, fees, and penalties for being a solar producer. I want him to
but
go back
but also the
for the
proposal
last
would,
10 years and help us to recover all the fines, fees, and restrictions that we've suffered under PG&E.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just saying right now in front of us, we have
Yeah.
the California Public Utilities Commission is about to basically burn rooftop solar to the ground. And it's not just for future solar users. They would roll back existing protections that you have as a solar user from 20 years to 15 years, basically destroying those last 5 years of what you were basically expecting. So existing solar users are absolutely going to be affected. If you went solar in whatever it was 15 years ago, and this goes into effect next year, you're going to have a solar tax. And so everyone's got skin in this game. And I will just say, I think there's a lot of things that I want to be doing, including what you're describing, to be able to move the needle and expand people's right to make energy from the sun. It is also the case that this attack by the CPUC, if we don't fight it off, then there is no future. It's done. And so I think this is the thing that we have to stay focused on. It's good for us to be aware of all the other things that we have to do to push our rights forward. And sometimes the best defense is also a good offense. So I'm not saying we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. But it is the case, to give credit where credit is due, that Mr. Musk, like many other leaders in the solar industry, have been very vocal in not just themselves saying that the CPUC is off their rocker for proposing a solar tax, et cetera, but they have emailed, Tesla has contacted their customers multiple times. Those customers I've seen with my very own eyes have jumped into action, called the governor, they have written to the governor, they have attended protests, and are very active in spreading the word. Like, chances are, if you've seen a Nextdoor, thread on this issue, it probably was posted by someone who has solar, who got alerted by the whole thing from either us or from their solar company. It could have been Tesla, it could have been, somebody else. These are good things. And we also need higher profile people, like you say, kind of spreading the word too. A little bit of that has happened. Governor Schwarzenegger did a huge, very well, widely read piece that was in the New York Times. He's been out on social media very, very aggressively, just talking about how this is a big deal. Edward Norton, Mark Ruffalo, the two Incredible Hulks, have been out, very, very, vocal on this. Obviously, I would love to see more. And given how big of an issue it is a little surprising that you don't see more of these kind of big names, jumping up. On the other hand, this is definitely more people in California have spoken out on this issue in the last year. I can say this, I can't prove this, but I'm very, very sure this is true. More Californians have spoken up on this issue than any other political issue in California, except maybe the pandemic. Like, it's just obvious this is the #1 issue right now that is on voters' minds. And the fact that it even popped up in a random New York Times focus group with somebody that doesn't even have solar just shows, like, this is a proxy fight for, is the government on our side or is the government on the utility side? Is our future going to be where the government's just going to double down on a corrupt, broken system that's basically robbing us blind, is burning down the state, is turning off our lights? Are they going to double down on that and just side with the same entrenched special interests that are doing that?
When you say burning down the states, for me, that's a local issue. That's burning up my community.
Yeah.
That's burning up not my home yet, but my neighbor's home, all of the wilderness areas around me. We've lost lives. And even beyond my neighborhood, the loss of air quality, stretches all the way down to San Francisco. 6-7 weeks every single year is ridiculous.
Long-term health
is
effects from
time
that.
after time after time, because PG&E is allowed to burn up our neighborhoods. And then after they do, rather than rebuilding and paying for the damage they've done, they just give the folks some stock. That's it.
Right.
And
right.
Gavin Newsom lets them get away with it.
They get shorted by the investors on that stock too. I mean, like, it's like the insult and indignities just like roll on and on and on. Just when you think it can't get any worse, and that whatever, they get another slap on the wrist, and here they are again and again and again, and then another rate hike and another rate hike and another rate hike, and then another fire. And somehow Governor Newsom and the CPUC, they've got, they just don't get a handle on this, and it is unbelievable.
Well, they get away with it because nobody holds them accountable.
Nobody holds them accountable. Yeah.
I mean, the recall effort is ridiculous when, hey, wait a minute, there's assembly members and Senate members in the state legislature, and any one of them can step forward with a proposal to do the opposite of what Gavin's doing, do the opposite of protecting PG&E's monopoly, protecting their rights to price gouge us, protecting their fines, fees, and restrictions on all of us. And I mean, it seems to me that that's the direction to go. I mean, everyone's got a representative, everyone's got an assembly member, everyone's got a senator, and it's like, get them to step up and take action. So you mentioned the Incredible Hulks retweeting the issue. Let's get assembly members to retweet the issue. Let's get them on public record for their position on all of these things. Every single fine, fee, and restriction imposed on residential solar, I want them to take a position on that. Are you for it or against it? Do you want them to rip us off for 6 months before the electricity is turned on for our benefit, where they gouge us and they take all that benefit? Do you want them to be able to restrict the amount of solar that we can put on our rooftop? And then when it comes down to the net metering, the true up at the end, obviously, if I've got solar on the other 80% of my roof, I want to get better than 4 cents per kilowatt.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want PG&E to be profiting from that. I want to sell it to my neighbors, and I'm going to sell it to my neighbors at a competitive free market rate that's half of what PG&E gouges them for, which is exactly what commercial solar goes for. Commercial solar, I'm picking it up at 17, 18 cents every month on my bill versus what I have to pay PG&E. Starts at 22, goes to 38. It's a ripoff.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, we are in a moment where the governor, members of the legislature, what have you, the opportunity for them to just take a clear position that is just 100% where the people are at and would 100% benefit the people. The opportunity is right there. I mean, it could not be more clear. You know, like this is, and this is one, you know, the governor has been completely silent on this, and
but he's taking action and he's protecting PG&E hand over fist.
What I would say is that I think this is an unwritten chapter. He's clearly conflicted because he's silent on it, even though it's a no-brainer. But I think this is unfolding before our very eyes. And I think this is something that, one thing that I'm trying to say to voters right now with respect to Governor Newsom is, don't assume anything. This is an unwritten chapter. And this is, if there was one time now where voters have a window to get to him and make him understand where he should be, who he should be siding with, this is the time to do it. That we're in a very fluid moment. And this is where voters, the louder that we speak and the more relentless that we speak, I think there is an opportunity. I think Governor Newsom might seize the opportunity. And so I think we should give it to him. And he could really make the difference in this whole fight.
Voters need to go through their assembly members, and voters need to go through their senators, because they're voters and these are the people that represent you. And they should be repeating the words that every single citizen goes to them and says, hey, stop this tax. Hey, get rid of this corrupt restriction. That's what the assembly members should be repeating, just retweeting it, just saying, oh, gee, that's a good idea. Oh, gee, why is it that way? And of course, I'm going to side with people who are producing residential solar. I'm not going to side with PG&E. They should be coming out and saying that instantly, immediately. But as a longtime legislative advocate, I'm well aware there is no issue that's important to any legislator, assembly member, senator, congress member, until it's an election issue. Yeah, if we don't make it an election issue, if we don't come up to this, hey, will you pledge to do this to get my vote? And then when they say no, say, hey, guess what? Your new challenger is pledging to get rid of these fines, fees, and restrictions that are imposed by PG&E. So I'm going to vote for them, and I'm going to invite everybody else to vote for them too. That's when our assembly members will pay attention, and that's when they'll take action.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. It's, you know, political competition is what, you know, makes the world go around.
It's back to citizens and citizens taking action. And citizens don't realize, if you tweet all day on, you know, social media, you get nowhere. You need to take it to your representatives and communicate to them that this is what you want. Casting your ballot for the crooked incumbent isn't going to get you what you want. It's not going to match up with your tweets. You've got to take that step and go from tweeting to the representative, ask for the pledge, and then when they deny it, you have to support their challenger. Those are the steps that people don't understand, because tweets are ignored. In fact,
like, I mean, democracy and, you know, political movements are a funny thing. And one thing that I think is, you know, we want to orient people to do as high, make their voice heard in the most high value way possible, right?
That's their vote.
You're doing that just by virtue of running for office, which is like probably the most high value.
But for the majority of people,
it's
your vote. If you cast your vote for the incumbent that leaves the status quo in place, then you've just nullified every voice and expression that you've made for the last 5 years, because you're going forward with the status quo, all those
Mhm.
bad rules in place.
So voting obviously is fundamental to it. I think what I
And where
want to
you
just,
cast your ballot.
and who you cast your ballot for, of course, that's very, very important, and central. It's a central thing of being, in a free society that's a democracy. But I would say that I always encourage people, I go, I have to get on the right side of this whole thing, probably because they were worried about the next election and would this be salient. But I'm just saying, as a citizen, I think you want to use all of these tools, any way you can to broadcast what's going on,
Well,
because you want to
that
alert your fellow
information that you just
citizen.
shared lets us know how close we are. So for that specific legislation, if Solar Rights Alliance can publish, here's the legislation, this is what we'd like done with it, here's the assembly members that are for it, here's the assembly members that are against it, that helps guide citizens to action and lets them know,
Yeah,
those who are
where do your
supporting
people
your
stand?
position,
Yeah.
they're just going to get a quick thank you. Those that are against, people are going to step forward and take action.
Yeah, that's something that, I mean, we're a new organization, so we're just, and we're just really just kind of getting things started. But I think one thing we aspire to do is, as the voting record, becomes clear on all this stuff, to absolutely make sure that people know, where do their electeds stand on some of the most important decisions that are happening with respect to rooftop solar. And a lot of times, this stuff happens behind closed doors, so people don't actually get on record, just the way it all works. And that's part of the problem. And one thing that we're, thinking through is just how to do a fair system where people can actually evaluate where their folks stand. The spring vote on AB 1139 was an excellent proxy in the state assembly on where your electeds stood. We did publish that, and we probably should publish it again, so that people know. And there'll be other things coming up too that we want to be paying close attention to make sure that people know, okay, here's where your folks stand. There's also, I think we're going to start seeing, as you were saying, members of the legislature are eventually going to have to take a stand on what the CPUC is doing. I think a lot of folks are trying to avoid taking a stand, but it's starting to happen. So I think we'll also see a picture as we, in a month or so, of, did your legislator take a stand? And if they did, what side did they come down on? And that's going to be important information. So thank you for, by the way, running for office. I think it's always good when people, it's hard to do. And I think, as you know, and I think that's like, it is the hardest and highest form, I think, of, act that a citizen can do, is just to put themselves out there and, enter into the arena as it is. And so, that sets a nice high bar for the rest of us that are not doing that. And I'm glad that you're encouraging people to just, get in the game, because, it's eat or be eaten. The special interests certainly are in the game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's what they do, right? So if we don't take action, they will simply continue to take advantage of us.
Right, right. I mean, you can complain, you can say the system is corrupt. All those things can be totally true. And it doesn't matter, because if you're not doing anything, then you're just getting eaten for lunch. And I just
Exactly.
don't think that's not, it's just, you're never going to get all you want. It's a hard world out there, and most of the power is arrayed against you. But that doesn't mean, and I forget who said this, is, there's no building too tall where a little dog can't come by and piss all over it. And, I think the people can do tremendous things. We don't get to do it very often, but we should never underestimate our power. And especially on something like this, we should absolutely not underestimate what we can do when we speak together.
Excellent. I want to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I look forward to all the great things that we're going to do together. I'm confident that we will be able to defeat these new taxes, and I'm hoping that you'll join me to go after, and like you say, play offense and go after the existing fines, fees, and restrictions, because I'm a free market economist. I want residential solar producers to be out there competing with commercial solar producers, and easily competing with PG&E, and just taking their revenue away from them and reducing their profitability. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I would look forward to that as well, David. The sun belongs to everyone. So
Yes.
we want to stop these ridiculous, the tax, and then we need to just advance all the other barriers that are standing in the way, so that we can really just unleash the freedom, that comes with the sun and solar.
Fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate your time very
All right.
much.
Yeah. Thank you too.